Good afternoon and welcome. We will open now the fifth panel in this third international workshop of Amazon Dams for the International Research Network. This last panel is closing the cycle of this third workshop and is going to deal with this topic: key knowledge gaps for decision making and management processes. I am Evandro Mateus Moreto. I am a professor of the University of Sao Paulo. I am co-leader of the international network of Amazon Dams. So I would like to share with you that, just to let you know some things, I will share with you this figure that has this general aspect that guides this panel. Here we have this pyramid of knowledge with data, information, indicators, and the knowledge itself. And on the other side, the decision-making process. The question that will guide us to this afternoon is related into three levels: how these data, information, and indicators will be produced, organized within each domain, how this information will be synthesized in between one level and the next one until we could shape this knowledge and integrating all the knowledge we have, and how this knowledge will end up addressed towards the decision-making process. So from this image, our main question tonight or this afternoon will be: what information, indicators, and procedures are needed to improve existing policies and practices? So from that question, that is a guiding question, we will have three presentations, starting with Amarilis Gallardo, followed by Elizabeth Anderson and Paul Van Damme. So to start with this approach about the key knowledge gaps in decision-making process, I would like to invite Professor Amarilis Gallardo. She is an associate professor of the Environment and Hydraulic Energy School from the University of Sao Paulo, and also member of the master degree of Intelligent Cities. Her research is related to tools of evaluation of ecological impact or environmental impact and strategic planning, and her experience is to integrate ecosystemic services into the planning. She will talk about, during her presentation, the different tools or procedures to evaluate the impact of Amazon dams, overcoming the knowledge gaps for the decision making. Please, Amarilis, you can start with your participation. Perfect. So, I wanted to thank, first of all, the invitation from the network of dams represented by Carolina, Evandro, and other dear colleagues. This is a great opportunity to share with you very interesting audience about the evaluation of impact we conducted in the sector. I wanted to share this data with you, not leaving this chance of saying how proud I am to be part of this third workshop. So to give you a little outline of my presentation, we will talk about some general aspects of these tools. What is the scope of two instruments of evaluation of impact, and what are the recent research we have in our country? To talk a little bit about the context, we are talking about the Amazon rainforest, with all the important aspects of hydric results, climate impact, and availability of natural and mineral resources. And was a matter of the debate of the candidates from the US next election. So the Amazon rainforest, it has a huge importance, and we are going to concentrate our attention here in the hydroelectrical dams, and of course we will see this map that was published a few years ago that shows that the focus of interest of the expansion of these hydroelectrical dams are quite spread in the different contributors of the Amazon River basin. So there are some in process of construction, others that are already there operating from some time. So without any doubt, the Amazon rainforest have this matter of the mineral exploitation that is showing some issues, conflicts that came from the mineral extractions. There were a matter of debate with the University of Sao Paulo and also other universities in terms of mineral legislation that are in process of regional development with this tool of decision making in some policies of development of the Amazon rainforest. Reason why the Amazon related to hydroelectric plants and other aspects related. So this is the importance of the importance of the Amazon rainforest balance from a paper that a colleague recently published about the expansion of these hydroelectrical centrals and their effect on the biodiversity in the Amazon rainforest, something that also happens in other parts of the world, such as Congo in Africa and Mekong in Asia. So these are some data about the hydroelectrical centrals that are in operation and in constructions that are proposed in the process of planning. So we see that is not, there are some graphics regarding the concentration of hydroelectrical centrals per square kilometers. And here I would like to use this opportunity to put this work into the context around the tools that we could use for the evaluation of impact, and not only apply in the electrical sector, but also the practice of the evaluation tools that we use to measure the environmental impact in our country. So we have two instruments: evaluation of environmental impact, that is a decision-making tool that is applied around the globe. We have some aspects that countries regarding United Nations have evaluated the environmental impacts for the decision-making process. But this is a very important tool for the decision-making process related to the environmental impact of the hydroelectrical power. But this one is talking specifically of the project process, the engineering project. So once everything was discussed, so many things has gone away. So very little is there to implement in terms of changes of the focus of the project or reducing the impact in the communities. So once the decision has been taken, it will be very difficult to influence that decision making in terms of strategic planning by Brazil. And sometimes those tools are not conducted in the right time. So it's not only a matter of having an excellent tool to measure the impact, but also to do it in the right time so we could modify the impacts regarding based on the results we have on the evaluation process. So that's why it's important to integrate this type of evaluation, such as the one we have in the right side of your screen about the evaluation of integrated basin of the Teles Pires River, and we have this analysis of the hydrographic basin, evaluating the current hydroelectrical plants that are there, and to analyze what will be the impact if new dams are built. This is a sector that has seen important progress when compared with other sectors. This is the concern of integrating the approach of these environmental impacts, multiply by a reduction of the hydrographic basin. So we have this couple of tools that are used in terms of a pragmatic way to implement this hydroelectrical planning in the Brazilian rivers. And regarding the effects of these new projects, there are some recent research of the results that came from these approaches. And I wanted to bring to you a little bit of what we have discussed in terms of the current practice, of their limitations, what improvements could we implement related to these instruments, the evaluation of environmental impact, and other tools to plan, to governance that could respond to that aspect that we wanted to discuss during this afternoon. So related to the accepted papers, we have this project that was conducted in 2017 with a group of research with my master's degree students, and the concern was testing this tool of integrated environmental impact analysis. So we studied the evaluation of the basin of the Teles Pires River. The image you will see in the left bottom corner of your slide. And we found 6 hydroelectrical plants and 21 hydroelectrical centrals. So our concern was, so this integrated analysis will take the chance to discuss the cumulative impact of these hydroelectrical plants. What was done and what is the quality of these studies regarding the decision-making process, or to support the decision-making process. So what we do? We analyze the practice of these cumulative impact practices. We have some differential measures that you use during this research. And if we wanted to do a general analysis of the basin regarding the hydroelectrical centers and plants that were implemented in this area to analyze the impact of in the environment for the decision-making process for the future project, we will see what will be the impact of this previous work for a new project. So what would we get? We were able to visualize, to evaluate that some good practices that were validated as good practices internationally present in the evaluation tool of the integrated evaluation were an important aspect. A constant or a limitation will be this matter of the cumulative impact. This is only considered in hydroelectrical entrepreneurship. And when we talk about hydrological basins, we talk about multiple resources. The focus is not only the hydroelectrical central, because we have many resources, not only the hydro resources, but also the use of the soil. And we have some limitations regarding the planning stage to analyze these kind of projects or so if we evaluate the good practices in that time, we will establish some limitations. So we have to conduct a very great effort to strengthen the individual analysis of projects. And there we have another doubt about the this time not based on the cumulative impact, but we discussed here with many colleagues, experts in the area, to evaluate that cumulative aspects, but take into consideration the electrical centers, and there's where we studied that aspect of the projects that we see in the image. We have protected areas, hydroelectrical centrals, the areas that are destined to traditional communities. And we will see here a little map of contributor of the Tapajós River. What happened in this little region? So when we analyze this sector into the integrated plan, if they included PCH, the PCH are in a different cycle of have a different cycle of planning, so they could not be included in the local or regional analysis, but have to be a matter of integrated analysis for the entire basin. What we are able to do? So we analyzed that we kind of confirm what we found in the previous study, studying a different basin, including the PCH, getting similar conclusions in terms of the needed actions around the hydroelectrical centers, and we consider an instrument that we have been used. If a strategic instrument could be used, we will be able to improve this analysis for the improvement of the region and have a better reflection around the planning of hydroelectrical centers. So this one work that I was part of with Dr. Roseli Benassi and Dr. Gallardo. Now it's in a process of publication, including the multisystemic systems. And we were able to show that the structure of the evaluation regarding the integrated tool was able to have this approach to evaluate the ecosystemic services. So this integration will result into interesting effects on the planning process. So we have some promising pathways to strengthen our tools to measure the impact in the Brazilian basin. So the idea is to increase the impact of cumulative impacts. There are some previous experiences regarding the hydroelectrical sector, but we need to generate a quality performed analysis to include the ecosystem service both in the cumulative impacts analysis, and that will influence the individual understanding. Including ecosystem services will include the inclusion of local people or who will be the ones who suffer the most from this pandemic. And that will be important to integrate this perspective of ecosystemic services of this approach. And this will be an opportunity to have like a strategic window, because this is an instrument that is addressed to have policies, plans, and programs such as other countries do, like in Europe. And in Brazil, it's a voluntary aspect. And this is an instrument that is there to strengthen, sustainable instrument to sustain it, because so this is a process that have to go from the level of the plant to the level of the project, and to conduct it an horizontal analysis. We don't only have pressures by the hydroelectrical power, but also for hydrological resources, the presence of gases in the environment, process of other industries. So this will be interesting to have a more wide view of the problem, and that will allow us to define better, to have an evaluation more concrete for the entrepreneurship. So what will be foreseen in legislation? How can we use that information for decision making? And I would like to thank you all, just to give me a minute, asking you to give me a minute to finish this presentation, just to promote the tiring regarding the hydroelectrical sector planning. And I would like to mention as well that part of this process comes here to strengthen the environmental governance of the electrical sector. I would like to thank the FAPESP, who are the ones who help us economically with these projects, and also our students in the master and PhD degrees that help us to conduct the research we presented. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Amarelis. Was amazing, these tools of decision making. And thank you so much. And in this sequence, we will close the third presentation with the Paul Van Dam, Director in Biology by Catholic University of Leuven, Director of the Non-Governmental Center of Cochabamba, and Honorary Professor of the University San Simón of Cochabamba, Bolivia. His research is the evaluation of impact ecology of aquatic mammals and fish. And he will talk about governance, species invasions, and species extinctions, timeline and time lags.
Buenas tardes a todos, muchas gracias por esta oportunidad. Y primero, mis disculpas porque cambié un poco el título. Entonces, mi título cambió, me limité un poquito a los 15 minutos y voy a hablar en
español. The title has changed. I'm going to speak in Spanish. So I'm going to talk about governance, species invasions, and species extinctions. I'm going to use a very simple methodology that is going to allow us to assess the situation and our knowledge about the impact in fish through timelines. I have a lot of people that has work in this that is not mentioned. First, as we know, hydroelectrical dams in the lower Amazon have a lot of risk of extinction for many fish species, and they affect these species populations. And something else is that they favor the introduction of non-native species. Some of these impacts are generated not directly, but through other type of beneficiaries of the dams. And their strengthening, it's an indirect consequence of the mitigation measures of the impacts. For example, fish farming. In the south, fish farming is promoted as a type of mitigation for the disappearance of fish species. I would like to take the example of the Gerais Sant Antonio Dam and the impacts in the Bolivian territory. I'm going to assess how the interactions between the different actions and different stakeholders like researchers, lawmakers, fishers, how they are reacted and how they have adapted to the impacts. And we do this through the building of timelines that are going to allow us to very simply view the time lags that a species need to invade a basin or a river, and also the time lags for the native species extinction. So I'm going to use two examples. One of the two is not related to hydroelectrical dams, but I didn't find any well-documented example of a species of an invasive species because we are just starting to monitoring the impact of dams. So I'm going to use our knowledge of an invasive species that entered through fish farming. It's a different approach, but this example can make us understand the patterns in an invasion of a species that potentially can invade Bolivia and other basins as a consequence of dams. We have the paiche. This species was introduced in Peru near Puerto Martolado. It escaped some ponds and they entered the Madre de Dios River, and through that river they got to the Beni River and the Yata River, and in the last few years it entered the Mamoré and Itenes rivers. This is an introduced species and it has become an invasive species. So if we see the timelines, we can see that the times between the introduction of the species in Peru in 1965 and the invasion in Bolivia are quite long. It was introduced in Peru in 1965 and it entered Bolivia in 76, 11 years later. And the first register in Riberalta was around 1984, 20 years later. Some researchers have calculated the colonization speed of these species, and the estimation is around 25 to 32 kilometers per year. The species colonized the rivers Mamoré and Iteñez, and now we are calculating a higher colonization speed due to several factors. One of them is that the rivers are different. Apparently, the species invades quicker the calm rivers than white waters rivers. In white waters, they need to go through hostile environments. So the type of rivers influence the colonization speed. And there's another factor that is very important, which is fish farming. We have introduction of paiche in Bolivia through fish farming. So if we overlap this timeline with the contribution of this species to fisheries, we see that the first register is from 2001, 35 years after its introduction in Peru. And in 2011, the species contribute with 80% of the commercial unloads in Ribera Alta, displacing all the native species. And in 2018, it was a commercial species in the rivers Mamoré and Itenes. There's a time lag of 20, 30, 40 years, then it became an invasive species with social and ecological impacts. We are not certain of the biological impacts. There's a study from Miranda that suggests that it has an impact on the native species. The mechanisms to stop the migration was very interesting. there was a regulation that banned all fish farming in the country. And in 2017, there was an administrative resolution that banned the introduction of these species in protected areas. And if we overlap this with other information, we know that in Brazil and Itañez, a few years after the resolution, there was escapes from fish farms of these species. And in a study in 2016 demonstrated that the paiche was already being farmed in Chapare, near the Mamoré. They have been farming for 3 years. So fish farming was before the regulation. And the first control plan is from these years. So it's 5 years after the boom of this species in Bolivia. I have a second species, the Dorado. This is a migratory species affected by dams. Now I would like to show the timeline to know the times that this species was affected by a dam. I'm sure you're familiar with the context, how the Jirau and San Antonio dams block the way for these species and they cannot reach the mating areas. The Jirau and Santo Antonio dams were built in 2009 and 2011, and it were commissioned in 2013 and 2014. 2012 was a key moment on the interruption of the migratory pathway for these Dorado species. So if we use an extinction model, because we consider that the there's a natural mortality and fishery mortality that would say that in 14 years these species would be extinct in Bolivia. This was done by Portobello and Carolina Doria. So these species would be extinct in Bolivia and Peru in 2024. Even though we don't know what's going to happen with these species offspring, they may be able to reproduce in Bolivia, but we need to still to demonstrate this. So this show that in order to demonstrate the impacts, well, this took a lot of time. There was in Bolivia first try with a monitoring system that proposed the Dorado as an indicator, but we had to wait for the first research from Duponchel and Hauser to demonstrate that this species is actually in danger and that is impacted by the dams. Here you can see the discontinuity in certain research processes in order to identify the impacts of dams. This has taken about 10 years to recognize the impacts of the dams in these species. And this has allowed us to fast a first approach to know into what's happening to the species. In 2020, the UICN is going to categorize it as vulnerable to extinction. In the two cases, we can see that the impacts of the inventions are consolidated in a time frame of up to 50 years. The boom of the invention is very short. Also, the extinction process until they are identified and researched took up until 10 years. Could be more or less, but these times are longer than the scope of the environmental impact assessment that only have a 5 to 10 year time frame. These impacts are just the tip of the iceberg because we are only focusing on the big species, the species that we can observe. We don't know what's going on with the smaller species. Taking into account the low intensity of monitoring and the difficulty of predicting the impacts, at the same time, we need to put emphasis on the studies of the impact of dams in migratory fish. Not enough emphasis on the secondary effects, especially in the case of dams that are going to be combined with hydrowaves that are more harmful than the dams themselves. Also, the interactions of the impacts of the fish farming. This is considered a mitigation or compensation method. We need to study more into that. The results of these studies have implications for the design of environmental impact assessments and also for the mitigation of the impacts. Secondly, the results show the importance of having a good plan for the monitoring and mitigation process in a transborder framework. These are examples, and we are leading this in Bolivia. It requires a lot of interaction. Researchers also need to find well-planned tools, more efficient tools to cooperate and to identify impact and reporting to being able to have an influence in public policies. And there's a considerable time lag between the diagnosed impacts or research impacts and the decision-making regarding fishing and regulation. And this shows, in our opinion, that the prediction capabilities and the identification of the impacts and the use of the precaution criteria among the environmental impact assessments are still quite deficient, and we need to develop better assessment tools. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paul Van Dam, for your contribution. It's a great pleasure to have these important conclusions about the challenges of the evaluation of environmental impacts from native migratory fish and other invasive species, and what are the knowledge gaps to mitigate efficiently. I would like to thank you for your participation, contribution, and I would like to thank Marilis and Elizabeth again for your contributions as well. And with that, during these three presentations, we were able to perform an eagle flight about the knowledge gap for the decision making, what tools we have available with Amarilis, initiatives that are quite important that showed the need.
Relacionadas à ciência cidadã, a envolvimento de comunidades locais na produção de conhecimento com a Elizabeth, e agora a apresentação
of knowledge with Elizabeth, and now the presentation of Paul Van Dam with the closure of this contribution from species of fish. I'm quite sure that with these three presentations, and with that, I would like to give you the word to you, Carolina, to make a closure, to act as a moderator of this fifth panel. Thank you so much, Evandro. Again, thank you to our presenters of the day, closing this event with a golden ribbon. And I would like to make a brief summary of our event. I could share with you this screen so I could give this closure a proper summary. So first of all, I would like to talk a little bit about our numbers of our workshop. We had 5 panels with 15 panelists present, almost 240 participants along these 5 panels, being 6 countries involved in this group of participants, having also the participation of the authors on the civil society that were able to share with us the videos that were presented in the previous panel. With that, I wanted to give an explanation of about an overview about what was presented. And the main objective of our panel was to present alternatives. It was the first panel that we had regarding the planning on the energetic sector. We have this presentation of Dr. Simone, who identified knowledge gaps, but at the same time, she presented pathways for the planning of the river management transformed by dams. Professor Alex Fleck presented a very interesting proposal revealing an opportunity of mitigating the loss or ecosystemic loss and at the same time generating energy. So proposing different objectives. And Gustavo Pontes from IPE introduced a plan of putting together the changes in new technologies available. In our second panel, we have aspects related to monitoring the impacts that was possible to observe the mitigation strategies could be improved from this interesting project that was pretty well explained by Dr. Giseli do Ministério Público Federal, defining the decision-making process to negotiate from the planning and the post-dam. We had also have the presentation of Professor Sergio that presented mitigation strategies, monitoring strategies of the impacts. And Mavi that presented in our third panel, we have the presentation to David Wegner that bring a very positive presentation about the role of the science in the decision-making process and leave as the main message that is needed to the adaptive present to develop a collaborative organization among the authors. They involve parts to have an authority to implement that proposal of management and establish actions and governance strategies and supported on science. It's possible to receive this support from different authors to make possible to have this adaptive component. And there was a Professor Ocelio Muniz in terms of the recovery strategies as a plan of new dams construction. Excuse me. Maven bring the need of a model of change the energetic patterns of Brazil, and for those who were impacted by the challenges of these dams. And during this session, we were able to do the presentation of our ebooks, putting together the results from the second workshop that took place in Tocantins, and the information card of the impacts of dams for fish and fishery, and we don't have them available in our site from the network. and we were briefly put it up in the network. Unfortunately, we have some technical issues, but we will have available for those who are interested in this material. In the last panel from the last session, a couple of weeks ago, we have these alternatives for big and small dams investing in other energetic sources such as sun, wind, or smaller riverside strategies, putting together different strategies, decentralizing the energetic matrix, betting on creative solutions, having those opportunities to put the alternative of having innovative alternatives, working with nature and not against nature, using the available technologies or assessing reliable strategies. Celio Bernan ended up his presentation questioning that this impact is not justified because we are generating energy in the Amazon rainforest, but it's not used for the Amazon rainforest. It's mainly exported to the industries that produce aluminum. So this is something that we should be pay very close attention to. And due to the fact that we are sacrificing the water and the natural resources without little or no local benefits compared with other industries, such as the ones presented in other sectors that benefited the communities. In this fourth panel, we also introduce the video sessions, and I would like to take this time to thank you all for sharing these videos. There are already uploaded into YouTube, and then we will share them in other social media such as Instagram and Facebook, aiming to introduce to everyone the initiatives and the people involved in this project in order to maintain the information accessible to all. So apart from being available in our site, we will share them around social media with the link or the contact information so we could network with the entities or the authors. So that opportunity allowed us to open debates. And today's panel that we just finished, I just wanted to make a brief summary. It was quite interesting to discuss this presentation from Evandro showing the proposal of this workshop, and this was going beyond what we already know and bringing the possibilities of improving processes of licensing, the decision-making process to reduce the impact of Amazon rainforest in terms of social aspects in these systems. As was presented as today panelist, this possibility went through the involvement of the local societies, of local stakeholders by citizen involvement. And I would like to close talking about the next steps that we are presenting as product first, letting know the participants that we will make available the certificates in the platform from today. Very briefly, we will share with you a little survey so you could fill with the information from workshops so we can implement some improvements for the next sessions. For us, it was quite of a challenge to change this session into an online platform, but allow to involve many people that maybe in a physical event will be very difficult to put together. So it was, at the end of the day, pretty positive, even though it was very nice to have this contact and the interchange of information. And when we are involved in a physical event, sometimes it's not possible. Hopefully, we will have a next event. And based on the products of workshop as we presented in the last day, we shared the videos from the presentations of our site and our network. We pretty briefly will present the report of the workshop so we could share them with you, with all the authors that would like to have access to them. And we will have a letter of recommendation that will also be available in our network that will be sent to those who were involved, and especially for the decision makers. These are the products agreed here. So this could be available for everyone here. And I would like to thank the scientific committee of our workshop that worked pretty hard during for the organization, building this panel, the indication of the different speakers, so this could be possible, so we will be able to have the involvement of everyone here, all the members of the team, both from the Latin American, from the US and Brazilian groups, the University of Rondônia, the federal state of Tocantins, the state of Pará, members of the University of Florida, the group from PCB, and SDS that are financing body from the US that help us to conduct the project that we are here together to construct. And I wanted to leave, for those who are not familiar with the contacts from the network, this is our site, our Facebook, where we will share some of the videos that I mentioned before. And this is our email, so we can get in contact. So you could be a member of the network. Repeating that any doubt or suggestion you might have could be put it in this email address. And I would like to finalize with a deep appreciation to all of you who dedicated some time to discuss a little bit about alternatives for Amazon dams to improve the process of implantation of Amazon dams, and all the panelists, especially who dedicated more of your time to share a little bit of your knowledge, and everyone here that shared with us this organization. So I would like to make a brief appreciation. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. Thank you so much.